say good morning again here in just a second. Okay, good morning, everyone. How are you? Thanks for joining us for our last case study practice. This is our advanced case study, and we're happy to have you join us. I will go ahead and, oh, I was going to say I'd go ahead and share my screen, but I'm already doing that. So, welcome. I am reminding you all, if you did not, I said before the recording that I recognized lots of repeat names hopping on. So I know folks have been joining us for lots of our other webinars. But if you happened to miss the previous case studies that we went through, we walked through a previous beginner case study and intermediate. So those are available, and we have some resources for those. If you weren't able to join us, we'd be happy to get those to you. As far as needing more practice, I think we've mentioned in our other meetings that we do have a full workbook that has maybe 7 or 8 case studies. So this is just the third one that we picked out of those few to focus on, but there are a few more scenarios that you can definitely use this FAFSA prototype to practice on your own. We're always happy to help and answer any questions you might come upon when you're working through those prototypes and potential things. I will put our contact information up again at the very end. But yes, I guess the one last thing to mention is that before we get started, I guess not just the last thing to mention, and then I just end the meeting, but the 26-27 FAFSA is available now. So it opened a few days early, which is great. So the beta testing periods went well. They got lots of good feedback, and it is now available. So any students can get started if they'd like. Otherwise, we're super excited for our partnerships across the state with high schools to provide FAFSA events for their students so that they can come and have their questions answered, fill out the FAFSA with, experts or, folks giving them guidance. So we're super excited about those coming up. So thank you to all who are participating. Uh, Looks like we need to provide you with a couple of links for today before we get started. There's the advanced case study workbook. So we have pulled out just this one particular case study from that full workbook. So we'll be using that to navigate through our advanced case study. And then the link that we'll use is this FAFSA prototype link with password. If you've used the access code to enter the prototype on the same browser earlier, you may not need to enter the access code each time. It may just log you back into the prototype. And then, yeah, we won't break out into different rooms today. We're going to just discuss this one case study together. I think in particular, this advanced case study, as we've mentioned in previous demonstrations, the prototype is super helpful. It's such a great tool to use to both practice and to provide like real kind of looks at what people can expect, but it is limited in its functionality. So with this advanced case study that we're going to go over today, there are a few things that it doesn't allow us to actually see in the demonstration. These are things that will come up in a live version of the FAFSA as someone is going through this particular situation. But the prototype is going to limit us just a little bit today as far as what we can see. So all of that to say that I think today we will want to pause for lots of discussions. I think this is like we said, an advanced case study. This is a little bit more difficult than we've done. So we may just want to talk through a few things and then go through any questions that we have that pop up along the way. This time, because it will be more of a potential look than actually being able to go through the full prototype in the demonstration. So questions are definitely welcome actively as we're going through. Feel free to either come off of mute. I know we had a couple of folks that had trouble with that last time. So Cassidy is here to help and is monitoring the chat as well. So you can always throw questions in there and she can alert me. I'm trying to keep up lots of screens and slides right now. So if I miss any questions in the chat as I'm going and you're not able to come off mute to interrupt me, Cassidy can do that too as well. So thanks. Sorry, that was kind of a lot of background, but for that, we'll pop out of our presentation for just a few minutes then. Let me know. I think most people have their cameras off, but if someone can see this case study, if I've moved the screen, let me know if you guys can see this advanced section here. Okay, awesome. Thanks, Cassidy. Alrighty, so we're going to go through this first example, this first case study. It says number 6. This is what you can find in that full booklet. It would be number 6 in that large booklet. But today we'll be going through this particular scenario, and it focuses on parents who have filed taxes while they are married, but they are currently separated. So I'll just quickly read the executive summary, and then we'll get started going through the FAFSA as the student would begin, and then we'll get up to a certain point where we'll start going through some other information about the parents. So in this example, the parents were married when they filed their taxes in 2024, but are now separated and going through a divorce. This scenario provides practice in determining the correct parent contributor for FAFSA purposes, understanding how recent changes in marital status affect financial aid eligibility, and reviewing financial aid award offers in light of evolving family dynamics. All right, so to get started, I think I saw Cassidy provide the link. So if you'd like to pull up the prototype and move along with me, that would be great. I'm going to be just toggling back between a few screens here, but any of these other links I'll either throw in the chat or Cassidy can provide as well. So for today, we are going to start the FAFSA or launch. Looks like I'm actually signed in one past. Oops, let me see. You also. Okay. I think the link that you all use, it takes you to a different website. You just have to scroll down a little bit to click on the prototype and then enter in that password. And then you should see a little screen that goes over the limitations. I've kind of already gone over that and it looks like my shared screen has already passed the limitations. But once you see that limitation screen and agree to that, you should be on the same screen as I am here, and so we'll launch this first user as Raya. We're going to be working with her today. It goes through to the login page. This is where students will log in with their studentaid.gov account information. If they're filling out FAFSA same day and don't have an account, they can click here to create that. It doesn't let us click through in the prototype, but real time they can. If they have their information, they'll log in and then start a new FAFSA form. And we're starting as the student, and we'll continue. As we've mentioned in previous demonstrations, the FAFSA does give students some additional training videos just on what to expect, some parent contributor information after submitting the FAFSA. So we definitely recommend watching those in real time, in a real situation. I'm blasting through them quick so we're not here too long and overloading with information. So application pulls up here the name, date of birth, social security number, and email, phone number. All of that information is pulling directly from the studentaid.gov account creation. So all of this is automatically entered in their FAFSA, and if it needs to be changed, students will click on account settings. It, again, is not an option in this prototype, but real time, it'll send them back to account settings to update any of that information. It does allow the student to update their mailing address. So we'll go through. It looks like we do have a little bit of background information as we're getting started as the student as well. So let's read through that first before we get any further. So Raya is a high school senior who uses the pronouns she, her. Her mother, Alcina, and father, Travis, were married when they filed taxes in 2024, but are now separated and finalizing their divorce. Raya's father moved an hour away. She lives with her mother during the week and visits her father on weekends. Alcina and Travis have two children, Raya and Lucas. Raya's father works full time and contributes significantly to the family's finances, covering a substantial portion of expenses such as food and clothing for Raya and her brother. Raya's mother works part time and plays a pivotal role in supporting the family, particularly in providing a home for her and her brother, Lucas. All right. So now we'll use this student information to start filling out our prototype here. So I'm just going to copy our little address over. North Logan, I believe. What was our zip? 84341. All right, we'll hit continue. State of residence. So if the student was born in Utah and has not moved out of state, we'll enter their date of birth. And I believe, yeah, she was born and raised in Utah. So we'll refer to date of birth, which is 5 of 03. And then this screen is for students to understand consent. They do need to provide consent in order for them to be eligible for their aid. Essentially, it goes through accepting their consent. And then at the bottom, there are some drop downs here explaining why you have to provide the consent. Even if you didn't file a US federal tax return or any tax return, we need your consent and approval for you to be eligible for federal student aid, including grants and loans. Providing consent and approval reduces the time it takes to fill out financial aid sections of the FAFSA form. So essentially, instead of going through a bunch of things one by one to agree to, this full section here is agreeing to consent. More information here for students. They'll go ahead and approve. In this particular situation, the student did not work, I believe. Let's see. Provided. Okay, so let's continue here for a little bit. So once she's agreed to consent, it moves forward, essentially connecting her with her IRS information. Folks should see this screen even if perhaps they didn't work and report information. This is essentially just a success screen confirming that they were able to make the connection there. And we'll touch. Oh,
To
sorry, go
clarify,
ahead.
no, let's get really quickly for a student or a contributor, if they didn't file taxes, if they weren't required to, they'll still import the information from the IRS and it will confirm that status that they weren't required to complete or to file taxes. And so that's what gets imported here.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, then we move into personal circumstances for the student. This section might be helpful if anyone is willing. They can help me with this. I think the student is single, but there may be some other questions, then I don't have to swap back every time on the screen. I think we've talked about this a few times before, but a good reminder here is that the student will begin the 26-27 school year. The students want to make sure that this is their future college school year, not their high school year. There is a 26-27 FAFSA that is still available right now for current college students. And so we do see some confusion with students starting the wrong FAFSA. If they are in high school and planning for college in 26-27, they'll mark their first year as freshmen. And then in the 26-27 school year, will they already have their first bachelor degree? No. We'll continue. In this section, students answer personal circumstance questions. I think we've mentioned too that in the real live FAFSA, there will be some information icons over here to the right that will give a little bit more detail if students have questions or need to know a little bit more information before they feel comfortable answering these questions or checking these boxes. And they can select more than one if more than one applies. For this particular situation today, we're marking none of these apply. And then the student was not homeless or at risk. So we'll hit no and continue. And then in this portion, students will answer additional questions about unusual circumstances with a yes or a no if any of these situations pertain to them. If it's no, like our situation, we'll hit that and continue. Just lets us know the dependency status for our student demonstration today will be a dependent student, which means parent information is necessary. On those previous screens, if any of those unusual circumstance situations, students are answering yes or checking those boxes, they may be deemed independent. And we went through a situation with an independent student in one of our previous sections and videos. So we'll make sure if anyone's watching this video later that we link it, but that information is available in a different video. For now, we're talking about dependent student today. And again, this section should be marked no. The student's parent is not refusing to provide their information. If there is ever a student who is answering these questions, they pop up as dependent, but their parents are saying, no, I will not give you any of my information for your FAFSA, they can mark this yes button for the prototype. Again, it has limited functionality, but if they were to mark yes, they would just get another pop-up that says, hey, you will only be considered for an unsubsidized loan if you're marking this option. For students to be eligible for all of those types of aid, the subsidized loans, Pell Grants, or work study, they do need to provide their parent information if they're dependent. So in this situation, again, we're going to click no today, but the answer may vary depending on the situation for your student. It goes through quickly some demographic information. This question does not affect the aid and is not shared with schools, but this question is required, which is different than it's been in the past. So the student does have to make a selection here before they continue. On the next screen, again, the answers are not shared with their schools that they're sending their FAFSA information to, and the answers aren't affecting their eligibility for aid. In this case, the student can mark prefer not to answer. If they are marking certain boxes, just be aware there is other drop downs that may appear, and they can mark any that are applicable to them in that situation before they continue. For current citizenship status, as a reminder, students do need to be U.S. citizens or eligible non-citizens to qualify and apply for the FAFSA. So in this situation, the student is a U.S. citizen. And then, maybe someone can help me with this. Do I have a volunteer to remind me? Did either of Raya's parents attend college or complete college?
I believe that both of them did. I know one of them has a master's.
Perfect.
One
Thank
of them
you.
just started college but didn't finish, and the other one has a master's.
Okay, so one or both parents completed college. We'll select that one and continue. Thank you. And then no will be the answer for this student. We still have both parents' information that we're aware of. The student's high school completion status as of 26-27. So again, that would be the following year from when they're filling this out. They should have their high school diploma at that time. And then we'll want to put their high school. I think, again, we've mentioned in previous ones, but if you're watching this for the first time, the school information is very important. This is how completion data is shared out with high schools. So just make sure that the students are selecting the right school here. again, this is very limited functionality. It's giving us this Bassett City and Bassett High School here that we can search for only. But generally, students can enter their city, high school, and use the search feature. Select the school down here and click continue. And then it gives them another opportunity to make sure they've selected the correct school. Sorry, it sounds like I need a little bit more coffee soon. Okay, finances for the student. They'll go ahead and click continue. The student's tax return information in this prototype, it is assuming, I think, the original situation of the student that we've used in previous scenarios where they had filed a tax return. In this situation, I believe it says the student did not file a tax return. Is that correct? Let's see.
That's right. I think it's on the second page of information.
Student information. Oh, students' finances. Thank you so very much, Cassidy. So Raya did not file taxes. So in this demonstration, it is a little bit different than what our prototype says here. But still, the student would answer some general questions, even if there is no tax return information, or if they did not file taxes. I think one was all zeros. The student had no IRA. She made 500 for babysitting. Okay, so we're going to enter 0 for all of these for the student. Current total cat was at 150, I think. And then I don't think she had any other investments or net worth. Is that right? And a thumbs up will do. I can only see Denise and Holly. Hi. Okay, I think it's 0, so I'm just gonna move on with 0. Select colleges and career schools. So here the student is able to select up to 20 schools. Again, we're kind of limited in our functionality here. I think in the prototype, we're able to do California schools. I think the student selected Brown. Let's check it out. Yeah, Brown and Lehigh. Is that how you say that? Okay, so we've selected our 2 schools. We'll click continue. Again, this is letting students know there was limited functionality. So it's only letting us choose those 2 New York schools, but it does let you know that in order to be eligible for grants in Utah, students do have to list at least 1 Utah school. So they'd be asked to do that there. And now we will invite a parent as a contributor. So I think we have gotten to this portion in a previous video where we've clicked on this link, who counts as a parent on the FAFSA form. I think this is the most helpful, especially in confusing situations. So I'm hoping we can go through the demonstration here. If you click on the link, it will open. I think I already opened it though, just so I could get us started. But I'm hopeful to get some live feedback as we go. So we know that Raya has 2 parents. If we're unsure, you can click on this link here that maybe clarifies. I think we talked about this also, that it maybe left things a little muddy, but a legal parent for the FAFSA form is the student's biological or adoptive parent. This pop-up also mentions adoptive parent or person that the state has determined to be the student's legal guardian, but there's lots of other language that says legal guardians are not considered a parent on the FAFSA. So I think for now, we'll go through to the best of our knowledge, which is that a legal parent for the FAFSA form should be the student's parent, which is biological or adoptive.
Ashley?
Drew. Yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead.
And I'll just add, Drew, if you don't mind quickly, just that we get the privilege of being able to meet with FSA every couple of weeks. And this language in here was brought up by us and a few other states that it's confusing. So they confirmed that it is an adoptive or biological parent. And we have asked them if this can be corrected just to avoid any confusion for you all when you're helping students and parents. So we just wanted to highlight that. That all of the advice Ashley had said is correct. But Drew, sorry to jump in there quickly, but feel free to unmute and share your question.
Yeah, you're good. I wanted to clear something up. So I read in this case study that it said that if the contributing parent is remarried, which doesn't apply to this scenario, but like just um if they're remarried, it says we must report the step parents' information. So in that case, if say that Travis got remarried, we would report him here as a legal parent, but wouldn't put the step parent and then would individually submit their tax information.
Yes, that's exactly right. So
Okay.
we'll kind of go through this a little bit more once we determine who the parent is in this situation. But I do think we walked through this in another scenario where parents were divorced, and that's correct. So if we determine who is the most contributing parent, if that parent is then remarried and has filed jointly with their new spouse, then essentially that parent provides information only and then would in the FAFSA application answer a few questions to essentially confirm that they filed joint taxes with the spouse or step parent. But yeah, this is a little bit different for this situation. Today, the legal parents are Alcina and Travis, and neither one has been remarried. So we'll go ahead and enter both of them and click continue. If for whatever reason they're like, oh, wait, that's not my legal parent, that's my adoptive or I don't know, guardian, right? Something that was incorrect, they can click start over, which I guess I shouldn't have done because now it's going to, there we go. This trend. Okay, so we'll continue. If they need to start over, they can. So here is where it will be helpful to maybe refer back to our case study to confirm that Alcina and Travis Tran, are they married to each other, not separated? So how would we answer this question based on what we know?
We would answer this one no.
Correct. Yes, they are not married to each other. They are separated. That is worded a little odd, so just be careful there. But Alcina and Travis, are they married to each other? No. Do Alcina and Travis live together? How would we answer that based on what we know from the case study? Holly, I think I saw you come off mute, but I can't hear you, but I can see your mouth moving. Were you going to say that they do not live together? Was no your answer? Okay, awesome. I'm so sorry. I'm not sure what the unmute issue. I remember we had that last time, so I apologize. But yes, thank you. It's no. So as you can see, as we've been going through, if we answer these differently, it may pop up a different question. So it is kind of some smart logic here as they move through these questions. So as we mark no that they do not live together, it then says which parent has provided more financial support for the student over the past 12 months. So what do we know? And then it does say if both parents have provided an equal amount of financial support, or if neither support the student financially, we would select the parent with the greater income and assets. The parent who provided more financial support may or may not be the same parent that the student lives with. So that just gives us a little bit of clarification. But anyone want to give me some more information about who we think has provided more financial support?
I mean, I guess in terms of just like looking at finances, it's Travis because he's employed full time.
Yeah, it does say full-time employment. Any other thoughts? This one can be a little bit complex because there may or may not be a right answer for every situation. Even this one that we're sort of reading is just what's written on paper, and sometimes we need to ask some clarifying questions, or even if we ask them, we may not know. But yes, I would agree. But does anyone
And
have any other thoughts? Oh, Cassidy, go ahead.
in the chat, I think Holly is the one that isn't able to speak unmuted, but they entered that it's the case study does mention that he contributes significantly um,
Awesome.
to the uh, to Rhea's situation.
Perfect. I love that. Thank you both. I appreciate the response and the assist, Cassidy. So yes, I think that's important. Even though it mentions that he works full time, mom works part time, but I do think that that is a an important like qualifier there, that he does also contribute significantly. Um, but there you go, Karen. See, this is a very complex situation. I do think that is a valid question, right? For keeping the home and providing that, because the case study did mention that the mom provides most of that support, right?
And I think to answer that question here, the FAFSA tool is asking which parent provides the most financial support to the student over the last 12 months, not necessarily who makes more. As we've talked about in the past, spoiler alert, that would be the next sort of tiebreaker. If both parents provide equal financial support, it's whoever has higher financial assets that would be included. But here is asking specifically of who's providing more financial support to the student. And Karen, I think your question we don't have the exact answer for. It's really a professional decision for you all, and also more importantly for the student and family to decide who provides the most financial support. I think things like providing, taking care of the expenses for the home for the student could certainly be factored in. And so there is a little bit of gray area here that students and families get to kind of grapple with and determine which answer makes the most sense for themselves, since there isn't any more clear guidance than what's provided here from FSA. All of those family situations can be a little bit complicated. So.
Amazing. Thank you. All right. How does everyone feel? Show of hands. Are we okay with choosing Travis as the parent who provides more financial support? I'm seeing some thumbs up, which is so great. I don't think I have that one on my computer, which is makes me a little sad and jealous. So thank you all for that this early in the morning. So we're going to go ahead and mark Travis. And then this kind of goes back to Drew's question earlier. In this case, Travis could potentially mark yes if he did remarry. In our situation today, excuse me, the dad did not remarry, so we marked no. But as we were potentially talking or thinking of other situations, if he had remarried, he'd mark yes. And then from there, kind of as I mentioned, Travis would be the parent on the FAFSA form, but then Travis's spouse information would also need to be provided based on a few things. So if they did not file taxes jointly, then Travis and Travis's spouse would need to contribute. But if they were married, filed taxes jointly, then Travis would just be the parent on the FAFSA. And then, like I mentioned, he would answer some questions just to confirm his spouse and that they filed jointly. But the spouse would not have to have an account on student aid, and they don't have to sign it as well if they're married filing jointly. So it may vary just based on a couple of other kind of little things. So again, important to kind of read through all the situations here and just see what's right for them in their current situation. So for today, we're going to pick Travis did not remarry. He is not remarried. So it just confirms that Travis will be the only parent that will need to be included on the FAFSA form. And the student would just want to invite Travis. Travis would then report their current marital status as single, separated, divorced, or widowed. So for Travis, I think we've all determined by reading through things a few times that Travis is separated. So we would go ahead and mark that. And then the student would need the financial information just from Travis. And he, again, would be the one who would provide information. So what we'll do now is pop them back into our FAFSA application. This is the prototype, but as we're looking here, we're popping back into Raya's application to invite their parent contributor. So now that we've determined who counts, we used that link. We're going to click continue and then go ahead and invite the parent. So let me just pop back in. We'll hit Travis's email. And we'll go ahead and invite him to the FAFSA since he was the one we determined is the parent providing more than half the support. So then the student gets to this section where they are able to review all of their FAFSA responses. The sections will open up and allow the student to click on them and go back into the sections on the FAFSA. Will be a little bit more versatile than this prototype. We can only see what we've entered, but they will be able to adjust those. And then they can check their contributor information here, click manage if for some reason they maybe determined, wait, it was actually the other parent, and they want to manage that contributor invite. They can update it and change it there in the actual FAFSA application. We just can't see that for the demonstration. And then they move into the sign and submit form. So the student just reads through their information, scrolls down and agrees, and then signs their student section. And then again, as we've kind of seen before here, the student section, oops, we're going to stay on this page for a second. That's just a pop-up in the prototype saying, hey, you've gone through it. But we're going to stay here so I can talk about this page a little bit more. So this is the student section saying that it's completed, but as you'll notice, there's no check mark over here on part 2 of the parent section. So that still needs to be completed. It says pending submission that they need to check with their contributor. So reminding students that their full FAFSA form will not be fully submitted until the contributor is filled out, but the student is finished with their section from here. And then essentially it kind of student some information about what they can do next. Under this prototype, if you go back here to view all scenarios, it lets you go back to the different ways we can contribute to a FAFSA. As I mentioned, as we were talking earlier, we determined that in this particular situation, Travis is the parent, but the FAFSA prototype doesn't have an option where he is listed as the parent contributor. The Travis one here, he's only listed as a parent, spouse, or partner. So it doesn't really work for the situation that we're walking through today. Just know that in that situation, after the student invited the parent would start the new form from here. They would get an email with that invitation. In this particular scenario, it's showing that Alcina is the parent, but we determined today that the parent would have been Travis. So what we'll do is I'm just going to swap back to my presentation slides and just show you a little bit of what it would look like manually for Travis as he walked through this scenario. Let me see. If I had, no, I think it's on here. Let me just share this one more time and then we'll go here. And I added them to this presentation so that when I share this with you all later, you'll have access to these. So essentially, the dependent student invited their parent contributor, who was Travis. Travis would then open that email inviting him. It would open up to a new FAFSA application if he already has a studentaid.gov account created, and they'll begin their FAFSA. Essentially, it looks the same as the students' beginning few slides where they're confirming their personal demographic information and can make any updates. And then they are agreeing to have their data transfer. This specific screen is oh, and I think Cassidy may have just popped it up in the chat too. But if the person is a non-filer or if FSA is unable to transfer information, they may see this screen. As we went through it in the demonstration, it does show like a green success screen if they are able to pull IRS information. For this particular situation where he is a tax filer from 2024, but is entering in different information about marital status, they likely will still see a green check here because they did file taxes, and the IRS may, still be able to make that connection. This information in the photo is just if data cannot be retrieved. So just something to note. And then essentially, they will continue answering questions about their demographics. Again, as we determined in our case study, the parent would answer their question about parent current marital status as separated. I pulled these, maybe I'll add a little caveat before I send them out, but I pulled these screenshots from other things that FAFSA had. So in their demonstration, they were choosing married, but for ours today, we're picking separated. And then the page pops up about any federal benefits that are received. I don't believe that Travis had any federal benefits. But if anyone is still looking at our other document and wants to confirm, let me know. But I believe in this case for Travis, we would mark that none of those apply before clicking continue. And then here is where the parents would indicate their tax filing status. So this screen does not pop up for folks whose data has been automatically transferred. This would pop up for someone who did indicate that they had a situation that was different than before. So the parent is selecting yes, that they did file a 2024 IRS tax form. But it looks like I didn't get an arrow marked on this one, but this one they would mark no, right? Did or will the parent file a 2024 joint tax return with their current spouse? So the answer would be no, because they are not their current spouse. They are separated. Then it would move into a couple of questions about parent family size and the number of students in college. They would need to answer this question about the family size, or sorry, they would need to, I believe the number in college question pops up. Actually, now that I've added them both to this slide, I can't remember
The
which
number
one
in
you
college
answer
question
first.
pops up second, but if
Okay.
when they're going through the form, I think what's important here, the prototype won't do this automatically, but in the real FAFSA, when a student, when the parent selects that they are separated, and not living with their spouse, that parent's spouse or partner number should automatically change to be 0. So the parent cannot change the spouse information. They can change the number of dependents down below, but that number would automatically change for purposes of the FAFSA. And no, separated is different than being legally divorced. There's an option if you remember back when the student or parent, in this case, the contributor is selecting their current marital status, it gives them the option to select divorced if that's the case. In this case where they're separated, that would be a different than divorced.
Yeah, there's two options. So I went back to this slide just to show that if they are divorced, but I believe in our scenario, the wording was saying that they were currently filing or in the process of divorcing. But correct me if I'm wrong on that. So maybe again, just um, a bit of nuance in that situation. There may be some that are answering that question as actually or legally divorced at the time of filling out the FAFSA. Cool. All right. Oh, and thank you so much, Casty, for going back over the information on these two slides. Let me see. So next are these two. These would give a pretty good demonstration about parent 2024 tax information. These like two screenshots here essentially get auto-filled when the tax information is transferred over from the IRS data exchange. So folks in other situations where their tax information from 2024 is reflective of their current situation, they will not see these two screens. So essentially, going back to a bit of smart logic, it's in the real FAFSA will kind of depend on how folks are answering questions. But if they had filed 2024 taxes, as married filing jointly, but now have a different situation, this will pop up so they're able to ask their questions. So here it looks like they're able to mark what their filing status was, which was married filing jointly. But they'll want to essentially do some specific calculating. So this might be a good time to pull back up our case study as well. Essentially, in our specific case study, the parent is going to need to manually calculate their answers to reflect their portion of the 2024 taxes. Since they did not like the 2024 taxes were originally married filing jointly, which is no longer reflective of Travis's current situation. So he will need to kind of separate out his specific 2024 tax information to account for just him or as if he were married and or as if he had filed like singly or filed separately, whether he was married or not. Any questions before I move on? I know these last few screens may have been a teeny bit confusing because they're not actually being demonstrated in the prototype, and I do apologize that the limitation of the prototype didn't allow us to fully walk through this scenario, but I do think divorce is very common and lots of different dynamics within that situation can change how things look for folks. And so I think it was still really important that we go through this demonstration and kind of walk through. I think oh, it looks like Casty did provide that link in the chat as well. We can go back to it here. Where do I find my 2024 tax information? So if folks are like having questions on where, it's really good about demonstrating and like linking to the number or the certain section where things can be found. And this list also shows like general information they'll probably be asked to provide. And so Travis in his situation can start thinking about like what he would need to calculate for his like adjusted gross income and things based on his particular information. So I think like Casty mentioned, this is sorry, now I'm pulling up the chat to see. I'm like a squirrel. I get very easily distracted if I don't focus on one thing. I'm so sorry. So let me go back really quickly to the chat. Let's see. I had a student whose parent.
So I think just to clarify, what will happen is if the parent is selecting that they're separated, but they filed their taxes jointly, the FAFSA may automatically prompt them to be manually entering their information. If you scroll down to the end of the case study and the review and resolution on starts on page 41, number 4 gives some numbers if you want to practice crunching those numbers of how things would be split up, and it gives an explanation for how to calculate that information. But if the form doesn't prompt them to manually enter their tax information, if it just gets automatically retrieved, the student needs to follow up with their financial aid office. They'll explain their situation and be prepared to submit their supporting documents. So, like tax information from their parent, they may be requested to provide a couple other documentation to verify their separated status, for example, or if the divorce is finalized, maybe their court documents regarding the divorce, but making sure to follow up with the financial aid office if they are not prompted to manually update the information, would be what we would advise for the next step.
And yeah, I'm just reading through Holly's question in the chat as well, and that's correct. Even though the parents were married at the time the taxes were filed, they are now separated. So the father was determined to be the only parent because of that separation. The father is the only parent that needs to report their information. And yes, he may need to report it manually because they had filed jointly, but now he is a single person, and we are just going off of, or the FAFSA would want to just go off of just his information so that the student's aid that they're eligible for is calculated correctly off of that like change from married to single. And like Cassidy mentioned, we're kind of going through this. The prototype doesn't let us kind of go through this whole situation. So we're a teeny bit in the dark as far as how it may actually look on the FAFSA application. But as Cassidy mentioned, if it automatically pulls the tax information from 2024, that like adjusted gross income is going to be quite high. And so it could be that once that is calculated, the student may at the colleges may not be eligible for as much aid as they could be because their situation has changed. And when parents are separated, they only take into consideration the income of the that single parent of Travis that we're talking about in this situation. And so if he doesn't go in and manually do all this and make it reflective of his current situation, then the student is going to have to reach out to their institutions and say, hey, I have filled out my FAFSA. It pulled information from 2024 when my parents were married and filed jointly, but that is no longer reflective of our current situation. Our situation is different. They're separated. I'm only getting X amount of, whatever their situation is. They don't have to explain it that way. But if they reach out to their financial aid institution, they're able to fill out additional forms. They may be able to provide uh, different information to the institution that then they can recalculate and have the student be eligible for additional or more aid than they would have before with that like combined or joint income versus a separated single parent income. Did that hopefully clarify or make sense a little bit? I hope. I know this one again is super complex, and each kind of answer can change very specifically for the student that you're working with. Let me pop back in really quickly to our presentation here. I just want to make sure I've shared all the screens. Oh, that was the last one. Okay, perfect. So yeah, be on the lookout for this situation, having this screen pop up with the parent 2024 tax return information. But again, folks may not see this screen if all of their data is just directly pulled from the IRS, which is great in most situations. We don't want folks to be having to answer all these questions manually if they don't have to. So if their tax information from 2024 is accurate and like reflective of all the right situations, parents married, filing jointly, all of that, then all of that information from the data exchange will autofill these two screens essentially. So that really makes it a lot easier. Families aren't, having to bring lots of tax information like documents and things to FAFSA nights and things like that. Yeah, I think that's the last screen to essentially demonstrate. But at this point, once the parent completed entering in their tax information, as you can see right up here at the top, there are these like three sections for the parent. So the demographics, we kind of went over a few things they'll answer there, the financials, and then a signature. So once they go through to the signature, they do get a separate confirmation screen that will look a little bit different than the one we just previewed, where it would say, hey, the student has now been notified. They'll get an email. Their FAFSA has been completed because the parent portion has been submitted. So they'll just want to look for that. The parent is able kind of from there to go back through their own information similar to the student. But the student is the one who would get the like confirmation message. And so I think that's the last thing essentially that would pop up from here that they would see and that you'd want to make sure is actually done and completed before you move on. Again, the student's FAFSA is not considered complete until the parent portion is submitted. And I think when I stopped sharing my screen, I noticed that we were getting close to 12 o'clock. So I do want to have a little time for questions in the next few minutes. I think we've mentioned again in previous meetings that it is recorded. So feel free to ask your questions if you feel like it's beneficial to the group. I'm also happy to stop recording at noon. And then if anyone wants to hang on and answer or ask any questions at that point, I'm happy to answer as well. I just pulled up the chat again to see if I missed anything, but it looks like Cassie's been on top of that. So thank you. But if I maybe missed anything from above, let me know. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Thanks for hanging in there today. I know this was kind of a very complicated case study, and it made it a little bit more difficult that the prototype functionality limited us from being able to see the whole situation. But all that to say is that you still are able to go through and play with the prototype. Essentially, you're not going to break anything. You can answer the questions as you want to. I mean, of course, again, as we've said many times, there are some limitations, but it is nice to, again, you could go in here and click to launch this user as Alcina, even though we know in our situation, like it should be Travis, and just see if we can just log in and start a new form as him from here. This would be the parent. It looks like it still says Alcina up here, but in our minds, we would know that it's for Travis, and we could walk through it that way. So there's definitely lots of opportunities to learn there. And again, if you're ever like playing through and it brings up questions like this that are hard to answer based on what you're seeing in the FAFSA form or made a little bit complicated by the language that they use, feel free to reach out to us anytime. We are happy to help clarify where we can. I think Cassidy mentioned that oops, I didn't mean to do that. Maybe I did, so you could see our email address. As Cassidy mentioned, we are available. I don't even know what she mentioned that I was going to share. This has been a morning, and I appreciate you all being here. Now that I've just rambled, did anyone really have any questions before we hop off? Okay. Well, awesome. I appreciate you all. Thank you so much. I'll go ahead and end the recording. That way, if